I would like to start this video with an apology. Many of you have complained, and rightly so, that you cannot stand the robotic voice that I used in my first video devoted to the Emela-Ntouka. Having watched the video myself a few times, I can understand the frustration that many of you felt by my use of an electronic voice. I did this because I simply couldn't stand the sound of my own voice. But most people don't like to hear themselves anyway. So, I have decided to bite the bullet, revamp this video with my own narration and add some new images, including a couple of photographs that you've never seen before. I hope this works better, so leave your comments below and I will keep improving these presentations as we continue to post new ones. So once again, thank you for your patience, and I hope you enjoy the video. Since explorers, big game hunters, and missionaries began to penetrate the dark depths of equatorial Africa, stories began to emerge of a large horned animal that killed and disemboweled elephants and even attacked native canoes. The native groups that were familiar with this animal lived mainly in the Congo Basin, an area of seasonally inundated swamp and forest that dominated the middle of the continent. The animal was described as being a quadruped, about the size of a hippopotamus, with a long heavy tail and a large single ivory horn on its nose, and leaves elephant-like footprints in the ground. The native people called the animal Emela-Ntouka, which is Lingala for killer of elephants. At first, the French and Belgian colonial powers dismissed these stories as being nothing more than tales of the occasional short-tempered rhinoceros that would charge at elephants in its territory. But as time went on, explorers and big game hunters penetrated deeper into the forests and rivers, and they began to realize that the Emela-Ntouka was not a rhinoceros. The animal was said to be a semi-aquatic herbivore, much like a hippo, and ambushed elephants at the river's edge or on game trails in the forest. It also made low, menacing vocalizations like a rumble or growl, followed by a snort. If you hear the following sound in the forest or near the river's edge, then hide as quickly as possible. Now that's what I call an unsettling sound. Eventually, information of this strange beast began to reach the Western world. In his book 18 Years on Lake Bangweulu, published in 1933, Englishman Joseph Edward Hughes, seen here with a tame lion, served as Assistant Native Commissioner in northeast Rhodesia, which is now Zambia, from 1901 to 1919. On page 146, we find the following entry. Chipekwe. For many years there has been a persistent rumor that a huge prehistoric animal was to be found in the waters of our Lake Bangweulu. Certainly, the natives talk about such a beast, and Chipekwe or Chimpekwe is the name by which they call it. Hughes made a thorough investigation of the Chipekwe and found that one had been killed some years before by the Waushi tribe, using their large viwingo spears which they used when hunting hippos. The animal possessed a large single horn made from polished ivory, which, unfortunately for Hughes, they did not keep. The Chipekwe sounds suspiciously like the Emela-Ntouka of the Congo, and might well be one and the same, for the description of both animals are practically identical. In 1954, the science journal Mammalia published an article written by Frenchman Lucien Blanco, a former chief game inspector in the French Equatorial Africa in the 1950s. Blanco wrote of a ferocious creature in the Congo, larger than a buffalo, that was considered the most dangerous animal by the Mokele pygmies, and which sometimes disemboweled elephants. A specimen was supposed to have been killed 20 years before at Dongu, but on the left side of the Ubangi River in the Belgian side of the Congo. In other parts of Africa, reports of what sounds to be the same animal were collected throughout the mid-20th century. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, formerly called Zaire, the animal is called the Irazima, and several notable East Indian African lakes, including Lake Bangweulu, Lake Mweru, and Lake Tanganyika, as well as the Kafue River and the Lukanga swamps in Zambia, are still said to be inhabited by the Chipekwe, which kills hippopotamuses with its horn, but does not eat them. While most skeptics dismiss these reports as being nothing more than aggressive rhinos, none of the two known species of African rhinos can actually swim. Furthermore, the rhino's horn is made of a fibrous hair called keratin, whereas the horn of the Emela-Ntouka, or the Chipekwe, is said to be made of ivory. But strange rhinos have been observed on occasion in Africa. In the 1930s, French big game hunter Georges Trail observed a very large but strange-looking rhino in the savanna of Gabon. The animal possessed an armored body, much like the Indian rhino, and had two extremely long horns. Trail watched, and his native guides, the animal as it continued to feed on the grass at the edge of the forest before it quietly moved away. Although rhinos are not known to live in Gabon, an image of the animal is featured here on a Gabon banknote. Decades later, in the early 1980s, Roy P. McCall, a professor of biology from the University of Chicago, conducted two expeditions to the People's Republic of the Congo in 1980 and 1981. He collected new reports on the Emela-Ntouka, which, after careful research, he likened to the monoclonius, or the centrosaurus. Both were medium-sized, single-horned dinosaurs, but no ceratopsian fossils have yet been found in Africa. So what could the Emela-Ntouka possibly be? In 1981, the African-American explorer Herman Regusters and his wife Kia conducted their own expedition into the Likuala region of the Congo. During their adventure, Regusters and his guides discovered the bodies of two dead forest elephants at the river's edge. Upon examination, it was observed that both elephants had large puncture marks in their abdomens, which was most likely the cause of death. Furthermore, their tusks were still intact, eliminating poachers as the cause of their demise. The Congolese guides who were with Regusters blamed the Emela-Ntouka for the deaths of the elephants and were anxious to leave the area as quickly as possible. Very little was heard of this intriguing animal until November 2000, when I traveled to Cameroon, West Africa with David Wetzel of Concord, New Hampshire. We decided not to continue our research in the Congo due to the recent civil war and the tribal unrest there. It was a good move, as we received a number of reports concerning several mystery animals, including a semi-aquatic horned animal they called the ngubu. Now the word ngubu is Baka for animal, but the pygmies pronounced the word in different ways to distinguish the hippo from the aquatic horned animal that kills elephants and sometimes attacks canoes. Prior to our arrival that same year, the Baka pygmies had killed one such animal in an elephant trap they had dug along an animal trail leading from the Bumba River and into the forest. They stated that the animal they had trapped was a river ngubu, which was as big as a hippo but possessed two large side-by-side horns on its head. Surprisingly, they picked out an image of the Arsinotherium, a long-extinct horned mammal related to the elephant family, that was thought to have lived in tropical rainforest areas, including mangrove swamps. On a later expedition, we also discovered that the Baka and other native groups that lived in the savanna area of Cameroon on the border with the Central African Republic spoke of a different kind of ngubu, but this time a terrestrial animal that possessed multiple head horns and a frill, similar to a ceratopsian dinosaur. After Dave and I had left Africa, our guide and translator, Pierre Sima, visited a village near the border area and discovered that the village hunters had shot an ngubu about a week before. By the time Pierre had arrived in the village, the animal had been completely butchered and eaten, with the bones given to the local dogs to finish off. In 2005, my French colleague Michel Ballot came upon two large wooden carvings, both in different villages in Cameroon, close to the border with the Congo. The carvings were of strange-looking animals that possess large elephant-like ears, a single horn on the snout, and a heavy tail. The animals are said by the villagers to be the Emela-Ntouka. Could the heavy ears be mistaken for a neck frill of some kind? Shortly after Michel's discovery, a third independent source concerning this animal came from a series of drawings made by the late Jean-Claude Thibault, a Frenchman who lived in the Central African Republic. Thibault died in the 1990s, but left behind these remarkable images of an Emela-Ntouka attacking an elephant by impaling it in the abdomen with its single nasal horn. A second elephant is depicted as fleeing the attacker. But is this odd-looking, unlikely animal based on accurate eyewitness events? Or, as Roy Mackall discovered in the Congo, the description of the Mokele-mbembe and the Emela-Ntouka would sometimes be confused with the heavy tail. Does the Emela-Ntouka really possess elephant-like ears? Or is this a confusion with the fact that the largest of these can grow to the size of a forest elephant, and therefore the artist added the elephant ears to his interpretation of this much-feared animal? Perhaps to clear up some of the confusion and misinformation, I will, for the first time, show you two photographs I took in Cameroon in 2003. These are drawings made by Baka pygmy hunters of two distinctly different horned animals that they are perfectly familiar with. The first is the river ngubu. Here we see an animal that possesses two nasal horns, which are meant to be side by side rather than front to back. The animal also possesses thick armored skin and a long but thin tail, much like an elephant. This is the same type of ngubu that the pygmies killed in an elephant trap sometime before I went to Cameroon in November 2000. Remember, the eyewitnesses picked out a picture of the Arsinotherium as the best representative of the river ngubu, at least in the Bumba and Jar rivers and adjacent swamps in Cameroon. We really don't know if the Arsinotherium possessed an armored body like the Indian or Javan rhino. But who knows? The second drawing is of the savanna ngubu. As we can see here, the witnesses drew a vaguely similar animal, but possessing 5 horns and a protective neck frill. This second animal also has an armored body and a long, thin tail, not a thick tail as some ceratopsian dinosaurs were thought to have. So the question is, are we dealing with a living dinosaur? This type of ngubu is, we are told, becoming rare. They are most often observed by native hunters in the most remote areas of the savanna, between Cameroon and the Central African Republic, and usually in small groups of 2 or 3, and sometimes even with a calf. Here is a photo of the pygmy chief Timbo Robert. I apologize in advance for the quality of this photo. Timbo is seen here holding open a binder with 2 types of dinosaur on display. On the left we see the sauropods, representing the Mokele-mbembe, as it is known in the Baka language, and the horned dinosaurs on the right, representing the savanna ngubu. If we compare the semi-aquatic ngubu to the Arsinotherium and the savanna ngubu to a ceratopsian, the resemblance is passable. However, the question remains, do these ancient animals of the past really still exist? Or are we dealing with a new species, perhaps more than one new species, still living in a largely unexplored part of equatorial Africa? Remember that Dave Wetzel and myself were the first white men to actually question the Baka pygmies about these animals in southern Cameroon, and we were told by them that we were also the first white men to penetrate some of the swamps in that area. That wasn't too much fun, I can tell you. Finally, by popular request, in my next video I will be showing what you need to go on an expedition of this nature. Everything from visas, inoculations, personal kit, clothing, and other items will be covered in this presentation, including the actual cost. Just as Michel Ballot organizes teams in France to go on cryptozoology expeditions to Cameroon, he has suggested that I do the same for Canada and the USA. So watch out for my next video. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't done so already, and leave your comments below. See you in the next video.